everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tracy Cook, and I'm the online media manager for ModernAnalyst.com, the premier community for business analysts. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar entitled Requirements in Context. Today's featured speaker is Ramsay Millar, business architect. Today's webinar will last approximately 60 minutes, including the question and answer session at the end. Please be sure to submit your questions in advance using the questions feature of the GoToWebinar software. I'd like to say thank you to International Requirements Engineering Board, IREB, for sponsoring today's event. And I'd like to introduce Stefan Sturm from IREB to get us started.
Yeah, Tracy, thanks a lot for the introduction. My name is Stefan Sturm. I'm the Managing Director of the International Requirements Engineering Board. I'd like to give you a short introduction on the IREB. IREB is a panel of renowned experts in requirements engineering who share their expertise to provide an enduring education concept, the CPRE, Certified Professional for Requirements Engineering. This is a three-tier certification scheme which consists of foundational level, a couple of advanced level modules, and an expert level on top. We do address the Agile topic as well with an IREB Agile primer, which means requirements engineering in an Agile context. Just an introduction, a primer, and since September, exactly since Tuesday this week, we are able to provide the advanced level Agile as well. So that's it for now. I will come back to you with a last slide at the very end, and I pass over to Ramsay. Ramsay, the stage is yours.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much. I'm going to provide today an overview of requirements in context over all the areas and domains I've been involved with and that you are involved with. When I first discovered becoming an analyst, I was in love with the job, and I've never lost that feeling. I have a lot of gratitude for the business I'm in. I've had a lot of great mentors, and you find out what you love to do, you'll never ever have to work again. So the point I want to make as a business architect looking at the whole world, we are a software company disguised as a bank. CEO of Citibank, 2001. If anybody's worked in the banks in New York after 9/11 and the adoption of rigorous requirements and modeling, you may realize that banks make millions and millions and millions of dollars by changing business rules beyond anybody else's beliefs. So every company today is a software company. For many years, we've been saying that. It's already been proven. We see the leaders in the market, Microsoft, Amazon, they're all leading with the digital revolution. Most of us are trying to keep up with that and trying to get into that game. Software requirements are not ever going to die. They continue to grow in importance, and we need highly skilled analysts, and the demand is immense. In my business, I mentor and build those people, and there's never enough people to find. In my background, quickly, I am not the smartest one in the room. I learn by watching bright people and testing it out and seeing if it works, and that's where I go. And I work a lot in the trenches. I'm a very pragmatic person. I started Agile in '93. Agile is not new. And I take the best out of Agile and take the best out of what I can. I've had great fortune in covering all domains. I've done every job in IT. I came to this business as a business lead in civil engineering. And we'll talk a bit more about that. But I played every role in the IT industry, coming out of business area. So industry concerns, and this is like beating a dead horse, but it goes on and on forever. Even Agile is not improving the situation. All the methods come and go. Lots of bright people, lots of bright methods, but we're not focusing on exactly what has to be done. And a biggest problem here is we do need to build better business solutions. The Vietnam War was the first time we ever put software in fighter planes. It was declassified in the early 90s. How many lives were lost and how much treasure was lost? And out of that came an RFP. And from the winner of the RFP was Carnegie Mellon University. It started a movement called CMMI. which some think failed, but it wasn't failing. It was bolted on at the last minute. You have to design requirements from the beginning. I can only cite these examples I've got here. I won't name the companies I've worked with. They're in confidence. However, they were all published in media and newspapers. It's well documented how much money and treasure was lost in the Vietnam War on the first time we've ever put software into fighter planes. You can't just do that with a user story or no requirements. Banking industry, I worked in a group in 2002, fined $6 million. The CIO wanted me to train 200 people to learn how to do requirements better. And what we did during the modeling sessions in a case study is we found only one business process KPI was missing, and for that reason they were fined. One tiny little piece of something. Cruise ship lines, lately, 1.2 billion software project, I was pulled in at the last minute for an audit. They were using 14 tools to deliver a 1.2 billion software delivery project. Does anybody think they met their target? Telecom industry, fined $47 million. They had no single source of truth. They didn't manage requirements. And by the end of my audit and engagement, they still believed they didn't need requirements because they were following an agile approach. The $47 million was rightfully taken by the CEO as a fine, and he took the budget away from the IT department. And the only project he allowed to continue was a project that would looking at knowledge repositories, requirements management, and traceability. The book I want to add to you as a mentor and a gift, because I've had so many gifts given to me, is a couple key books I'm going to mention that I've discovered that if you cannot afford training or get to training, these are good hints for you. The reason for these failures, in my humble opinion, is simple. There's many reasons, but the primary one is when I used to work as a consultant and trainer in the training industry for larger training corporations. Does anyone know what the percentage of IT people who become trained are? It's devastatingly low. It's 10% in the most dynamic, fast-moving industry in the universe. Doctors have to take 8 years. Engineers, civil engineers. I was a civil engineer. We don't let anyone write requirements. You have to be certified. You cannot build a requirement for a building or any product in the world by anyone doing it. There's a science, there's an engineering to it. I began my career as a business person in highway design and survey in the province of British Columbia, Canada, second only in road building complexity to the country of Switzerland. And you cannot just build roads by no requirements. You need some type of requirement. I think we all listen to this webinar because we seem to believe that. The Requirements Engineering Fundamentals is maybe the tightest book I have discovered on looking towards requirements, and the general business approach of why is business failing miserably. About 50 to 65% of IT projects are failing. So a person I've followed for many years and I respect deeply is Scott Ambler, one of the founders of the Disciplined Agile Consortium and one of the original founders of Agile, the second Agile movement. If a requirement was misunderstood, all modeling decisions based on that requirement are invalid. The code written is also in question, and the testing efforts are now verifying the application. So if we don't do it right, let's not do it. The probability of defect comes from human brains. We are basically have lots of problems in our brains. We don't see clearly. We have different views of requirements: high level, medium, low level. We have different understandings of what a requirement is. What's a need? How do we go down that direction? The cost of fixing things as you build deeper and deeper is extremely expensive. We are not having problems in our industry with the coders and the designers. We have tools behind them that basically help them automate. So between the lack of powerful tools and the lack of training, we have a crisis on our hands. 50% of the systems are failing, or many more. We can do that better. Carl Wiggers says the top 10 requirements traps. We've all seen this in the webinar Modern Analyst, and one of these other books I want to give you if you can't afford to get the training is buy this book. Impact of requirements. Requirements impact everything. if you look deeper behind software systems, as I do, having been a software developer, you'll see the shanty town. People don't design, they architect. The poor IT guys, the poor software guys don't get any time to do it right. They're asked to do it as quick as they can, get it done. Why aren't you coding yet? Code as fast as you can and create lots of software. But when you look at Falling Waters, or the architecture of Frank Lloyd Wright, this did not happen by evolution. This happened by architecture, requirements, and design. In 2001, the National Institute of Standards and Technology said that the U.S. The loss in software, faulty software, resulted in billions of dollars per year. Requirements impact everyone. And lately, 2017 in Frankfurt, Germany, the CIO Insight Summit commissioned a study that's referenced here. 68% of CIOs agree that Agile teams require more architects, from defining strategy to championing requirements, to ensuring development teams stick to the rules of the game. So a lot of these fads come and go, but we have to go back to hard work and basic requirements. How do we deal with complexity? Well, the modern analyst has many, many skills. This is just a handful of things I could find in my experience. You have to think strategically of the bigger picture. You have to have people skills. We have to have people skills. We need to be diplomatic. We need to learn very fast. We need to be creative, curious, adaptable, self-motivated, lead from behind sometimes, mentor, and also be analytical. So I want to clear a little bit of space in our brains, and humor has a good way of doing it. So I want to share this with you. Will Rogers, the famous American comedian and a very astute observer of the landscape, said, always drink upstream from the herd. Well, that requires an analyst. Why would you drink? Why do you always want to go and be with the herd? You want to be above the herd on where you're drinking from. So another thing I want to add for the modern analyst is the analytical skills, but your brain is the best tool. You have to have people skills. I'm going to cover these lightly because these are covered in most all the courses that we have across the universe of business analysis or requirements analysis. Some ways of breaking down complexity. I love complexity. I think it's the best thing ever created, because there is a way to simplify it, break it down, make it simple, disassemble it. And we have a few leading techniques to do that have proven over time. People skills. Well, I have discovered that it's not so much the methods we use, it's the people who get involved. There's risky people and risky requirements. I've been in situations where people have absolutely insisted that this is a requirement. It could have been the boss that used to do it 10 years ago. And he said, we did it this way 10 years ago. But the incorrect facts are 49% in 2001. I don't know that that's really changed. One thing we do know is Agile and storytelling has improved the omissions, because in Waterfall, we only did this once. In the iterative approach, we cycle 3 to 4 times in a story to find out what are all the other dimensions in that story. So story writing and iteration has definitely improved. But what do you do about 50% of incorrect facts? There's never enough time. There's time to code and fix it. So one of the difficult people we run into is the order taker, the BA that believes you don't verify. You just tell me what you want. Would you like fries with that? Tell me what to do. Another one is the methodologist. It is my way or the highway, this method or no other method beyond, and you see that occurring all the time every time a new method comes. No analysis, use all the templates. Give me the tick box and the templates don't make me think. The SME, I've been doing it in business. We've been doing it this way forever. Limited experience outside their area of expertise, lacks formal analysis training. We've always done it that way, so why change it? And the one that's the most fun to deal with is the evangelist. They have a very fixed vision view, passionate, enthusiastic, the answer to every problem. What's the next new shiny thing? So we have a lot of people problems in our industry. That's never going to go away. A modern analyst needs people skills and continually sharpening those skills. Another way of dealing with complexity is we can't generalize everything and say, oh, well, a generic view replies to everything specific, and we can't have a specialized view from the bottom and say something very special is also appropriate at the very general view. So we break up things into roles. into stakeholders, into organizations, in the who dimension, and we start introducing the idea of interrogatives. The way I deal with people skill with a CEO or CIO is very different than the way I operate with a person in a process model in operations or tactics. So that's another approach we do to break down work into simpler chunks. My greatest fan here, I'm a great fan of John Zachman. Business models are extremely complex. It's way far more complex than software. You're dealing with politics, people, using tools, organizing the departments, using processes. Everyone thinks they understand the process, but nobody's documented, so nobody knows what they're doing. We are constrained by many, many requirements, often called policy, business rules, laws, regulations, and we need many viewpoints required to break down. Of all the things I can share with you, the most powerful tool I have in my chest for using breaking down complexity is look at the world from the 6 interrogatives, the who dimension, the role, the stakeholder, the organization, the worker. Why are you doing it? What's your business motivation? How? How do we get it done? What? Where? Who and where? Who and when? Maybe take 2 interrogatives. So I'll cover that a bit more shortly. Abstraction. Abstraction, a model's worth 1,000 words. And we've all heard that term, or picture's worth 1,000 words. Abstraction is the use of models. And because I came out of engineering and we dealt with math models and Fortran on abstraction, and we generated digital terrain models, I was inborn with the theory of looking at complexity from the point of view of a diagram model that was generated out of a mathematical model. And you maybe have all seen, I mean, how could you launch a missile to the moon and back if we couldn't model mathematically and visually? So you need both the science and the engineering and the model. And it just boggles my mind why our industry is resisting modeling for so many years. It's growing, yes, but it's taking forever. And the greatest improvement to our industry was the UML standard notation, and of course BPMN, which is now part of all of that. This is just a handful of few diagram types. The other big thing I really like is chunking, and it came with George Millar. Magical number 7 plus or minus 2 was often caught up with cyclomatic complexity in software engineering, but we break complexity down into cohesive reasoning units, and stories are those things. Use case, a scenario, an epic, a user story. It's all the principle of storytelling that came out of writing plots in Hollywood. So the idea of a use case came out of the Hollywood writing scripts for Seinfeld. What do you want to, as a web customer, I want to order a book, I want to search books, I want to pay for the order. That has continued to grow and become strengthened over time. Chunking, using the 6 interrogatives, if you want to go deeper down, we could say 1 interrogative is a list, 2 interrogatives are a matrices. We all love quality assurance is really good at 2 columns, rows and columns. And more than 2 interrogatives, 3 or 4, this would be the who dimension, the when dimension, the how dimension. So we've got at least 3 dimensions in this diagram. And the focus of diagrams and UML is all to look at the world in different interrogative ways. So key requirements across the landscape. I want to cover just some basic methods here. A couple of methods we have is code and fix. This has gone on forever and it continues today. I don't think it's ever going away. We're smart coders. We don't do requirements or analysis to get. We don't let requirements, sorry, as typo, or analysts get in our way. And the faster you begin coding when starting a new project, the longer the project will take. The great software engineers I work with and the smart people in our industry who are great to work with tell me what you want. Don't tell me how to do it. But you guys start coding, I'll find out what they want. Waterfall came along, and you might find it's been dumped on massively. But Waterfall was refreshing when we had code and fix. I began so long ago that there was no such thing as a process to follow. Somebody came running down the hall one day with a book and said, look, there's a way to take some order. So requirements design, implementation, verification, maintenance has never gone away, but with Agile, we've done a good thing as we loop it back. It's very good for small COBOL programs in 1978. Small time frames, you sat with one business leader, the director of accounts receivable, you did a little flow chart, and you built the COBOL program. It's good for app programming, small apps. Spiral model for software development was first brought in '85, birth of Agile. I read it and I adopted it immediately. I liked the approach of spiraling from the essential high value, high quality stories, but stories weren't invented yet, so we used functions at the time, and spiraling out over time. So you basically have this spiral method, which still works today on all the Agile, they call them sprints or iterations, and the early adopter was Microsoft by Barry Boehm. Agile Unified Process, by some dumb luck, I discovered, and I used it right first time I read it. I said it wouldn't work. I tried it. It worked better than anything I've tried, and it's still one of my favorite approaches. Focus on customer, story-driven using iterations, evolve spiral method, deliver high-risk and high-value stories first, promotes reuse and avoid rework, and it has small multidiscipline teams. But the thing I like about this is, as a business architect, I can go from business model all the way through to testing and deployment from one line of sight, which appeals to me because it's more aligned to my business directions that I have. Agile Unified Process was built by thousands of people in the mid-90s, including Jacobson, Rumbaugh, Booch, and thousands of others came up with this approach. If software developers could have their way, they would do it this way. We need a business model, we need requirements, we need elaboration, and each one of these red arrows is figuratively an iteration or a sprint. So it gets us into the why did UML, Unified Modeling Language, and Unified Process work together? Well, I don't know, maybe there's some old timers on the phone, but we had a thing called function point analysis, which was a way of looking at complexity and breaking down complexity. So stories are a great way to chunk a business. And we have stories come in 4 different semantics. The stories are either simple, named, we just give it a name, great for extreme programming. A user story, which the use case metrics group tell us 60% of the stories you're going to write are easy. So that's where Scrum really does well. But what do you do when you get to more than 5 ifs in a story, or you get to 35 ifs in a story? So user stories being 60% of these stories are fine, but we need to be able to expand the user story to become more medium or difficult. That would mean that I can have, say, 60% of my stories I can use Scrum, and maybe for CMMI level 4, or I can use difficult or structured stories, and then medium. So the reason I like Agile Unified Process, it goes all the way from named all the way through. The use case metrics boards assign how many hours it takes to build one of these stories for easy, medium story. You might want to look at use case metrics and see how stories can be evolved, because basically user stories, and in my experience, I've worked in Agile shops, I've been forced to do Scrum, I've loved it, but a lot of people have a problem because they said, again, no one gets trained. I had a client, I walked in, they want me to do an assessment of their process. The 6 departments in IT had all bought 6 tools. Nobody had thought about how the tools fit together. All I did was a SWOT analysis, sat in the room, took all of their complaints, all of their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, represented them to the people and made recommendations to consolidate the problem. Do you know what they told me when I was there? They said their CTO told 300 people on Friday night, read a book on Scrum, we're going Agile. And that the company basically fell apart in about a year and a half. There's no training. The point I want to make is the training is just essential to get people knowledgeable, at least 1 to 2 to 3 years apprenticeship training to build software. People shouldn't even be around this industry unless we're highly skilled. Agile today, deliver based on customer priority and value, driven by epic, simple user stories. One of my clients had 3,000 user stories, 500 epics, and they couldn't trace an epic to a story. I'm just looking at the abuses. I'm not criticizing Agile. I'm afraid that that you would think that way, but I am totally Agile. I really want to see Agile succeed, but I don't want to see it being brought down by so many bad practices and lack of training and knowledge and experience on how to do it. So the Agile camps right now are all fighting amongst themselves, trying to get there, and we'll see where they end up. But really, they're just a simple approach of Agile Unified Process, completely simplified. Key requirements across the landscape. I want to sort of share with you in the last few minutes is some detailed information on these bigger picture ideas I've covered. And I only focus today on 4 types of requirements. Business rules, which are the king of all requirements, and I'll explain why. Data requirements are absolutely everywhere. You cannot get away from them. If you don't specify them, you're going to have to be asking over and over and over and over again. That's what we want to do, is not get into that. Functional requirements, which ensure business outcomes. We're all doing a pretty good job if we believe in writing these. And quality of service requirements, also known as NFRs, but I prefer quality of service because my customers never understand when I'm doing functionality how something can be not functional. And they call them other or supplementary, and the UML committee calls them quality of service or quality requirements. So what quality of service do you want? Do you want a 5-minute response time or a 2-second response time? And let's go back to business rules. Business rules are so important in my career, in my life. And of course, the book here I want to share with you is Ronald Ross, the father of business rules, book, which nails it to the wall. A business rule is a very special requirement. And it's a special requirement not because it's primarily because of what it does for business. Dell computers, many years ago, were selling Dell computers online. This was covered in CIO magazine, and I forget the year. And they basically changed one business rule. The next month, they made 10 million more in revenue, and the revenue grew by another factors of 5 in 1 year. What the rule was is if you're a new customer and you couldn't place an order for a computer that was greater than $1,000, they would decline your credit request and say, sorry, you don't qualify. So what they did is they went back to the business people and say, you know what, let's do some governance risk assessment on this and say, what happens if we give them their own credit card? These are most likely college students who've never had a credit rating, never had a card. They basically changed the rule that said, well, would you like to also have, they added a use case story, say alternate approach, would you like to apply for a credit card? And they would then underwrite the credit card, and that made them the $10 million. So that's why I'm a huge fan of business rules. We don't use them enough. In the future, we'll be able to change business rules and in 1 week have it running in the software set with no requirements. We have tools today like decision modeling notation that allows users to build the rules that go into the code so the coders never have to even recode these rules. So that's kind of why you might want to dig deeper into business rules. We're going to take a little journey for a couple slides following the life of some requirements, mostly the business rule. So if you start as high as you can reach in the stack, not that you have to be top down, you can go top down, bottom up, but just an approach, is the business rule has basically, I found great success in linking business data and functional requirements to capability. So that an organization, we even have capability architects or capability business architects or capability business analysts today who really understand the business area. And most requirements today are not saved for anyone. They're thrown away all the time. No one owns them. They're orphans. And when you think about how much money we spend a year gathering and refining requirements, many of them don't change. We need to start finding a way to do that, to improve saving of these requirements and reusing them. Process scope. When you're higher level, when you're designing a new process or fixing a broken process, we use a diagram called process scope. And basically it is a web customer, there's an input searching for books, there's an order process later to be detailed in a business process model, and there's an output. So there's one input, one output. This has a long history in our industry. It started as IDEF, and it was a number of other named other things in the past. and it has supporting resources, and it has KPIs to be attained, and the KPIs are service, quality, flexibility, cost, cycle time, all represented by requirements of some kind that can be tested. So the business rule would be appropriate there. A business rule can also be brought into the pay for order activity in a BPMN diagram. Another great book on a few books there to help you out. Bruce Silver, BPMN Method and Style. And the latest change in our industry is two other standards, DMN and CMN, which are ways of doing decision tables in BPMN diagrams and modeling decision tables so that the business rules can be brought into decision tables and used to assess things like qualifications of, there's 30 different scenarios in a very difficult story to resolve. Of course, writing a use case or modeling a use case doesn't work, and in that case, we would have a decision table. There's another way the business rule can be applied. We have a business rule to stories. Two great books written in 2003, Use Cases, Requirements, and Context, which is really what a number of us were practicing at the time, but Daryl Kulak and others made a point of writing it while the rest of us were too busy. Agile Modeling, Extreme Programming by Scott Ambler. In 2005, Agile people said, throw away the documentation, throw away all the diagrams, throw away all the models. We just do it with these recipe cards that we throw away. And that hasn't stood the test of time. Of course, you have to do Agile documentation, Agile modeling, and you do have to save knowledge put on recipe cards for the future. The use case theory is very strong and alive and well, continues to grow, and of course, writing use cases is very popular for a lot of reasons. The user interface is a state diagram, UML state diagram of how to use a smartphone to buy something. And the book that we all like to recommend is Don't Make Me Think. How do you build a UI that's completely simple to use and you don't have to figure out how to use it? That's a refreshing experience when you do find those systems. And of course, the business rule is going to show up because when I'm ordering a new order, the rule is going to decline on my phone and say, well, here's the reason it's declined because this business rule was not met, instead of just leaving us hanging. The data requirements and business rules have a lot to do with each other because data is where we store business rule knowledge. And the book I discovered years ago is Database Design for Mere Mortals. It's a very powerful way of looking at the data view. We also can have business rules brought into component assembly because when we get into assembling components to make our phones work, solution architects behind the scenes, all the magic that goes on there, we need to have the rules and data and functional requirements in those represented in our component design. In software design, we take the story and we build an object model based on the story, and then we can test it. So it goes from a use case storyboard to a use case scenario description or a written story of any kind, user story, and then it becomes a rigorous object model. And the business rule is coded into the methods and the objects, so it relates back to the business. The business rule also relates back to the business in a class diagram, and class diagrams in UML are used to generate code. The last thing we end up with is testing. And so the use case theory was written in '97 by testers. How can you test a story? The average user doesn't have a capacity to think of huge objects. A story is simple enough to get our head around. We can talk about everything about the story, what's the requirement for the story, what are the preconditions, the postconditions, what are the steps. And if we do take that approach, then essential software testing using the use case approach is very valid. So it gets us to the one of the last slides here is tools. And I'm going to start moving into tools because, of course, I've been using a tool all the time to do this, and there's many tools to do this. There's hundreds of UML tools in the market. And so I don't want to sell tools in this webinar, but I wanted to show you that without tools and without training, we are nowhere. I'm 5 times the analyst I was before I discovered stories and before I discovered tools to help me do that. It's been a long journey of tools, 89, about 7 tools in my career. So the traceability we want as a business architect, I want to be able to go all the way from finance department to the capability of financial management to the processes that are realized by that capability, to the BPMN and diagram activity, I'm very finite. I want to be very definitive. I want to be able to have a web customer traced to the process, traced to the story, traced to the user experience. I want to have a story tracing to my requirements. And my good old business rule, which I picked up during my storytelling or story writing approach, storyboarding approach, is basically described in my my specification, and the data and the story will describe the data I require and also the test set. So can I actually test my story so I get closure? I want closure from acceptance testing all the way to the story the business people were telling me about, all the way back to their specific constraints, all the way back to the process. That I want nothing less than that. And over here you can see a whole list of traceability objects that in these relational database type tools can give me. And that gets us to reuse requirements. Manage requirements for reuse beyond the lifetime of a project. It always boggles my mind how we recycle plastic, but we don't recycle knowledge. And every project, they throw away requirements. They're lost and buried in documents. They're lost and buried in spreadsheets. We have not automated that, and I think that's one thing we need to do in the next 5 years, because as we move, we're going to see way more projects failing. We're going to see more and more people trying to get into digital because it's cool and it's where they got to go to survive. And we're going to see massive failures in our industry as we move from legacy systems into cloud. And we need power tools to help us get there. We need powerful, skilled people to get us there. So we need reuse, and I think it sells itself. Requirements management using KPIs. We need tools that give you the entire landscape of requirements, that the requirements are reused for the life cycle forever, like a continuum, much like in TOGAF, the requirements management continuum. We need a requirements manager who can have, how can I share impacts of regulatory requirements? How can I manage business rules catalog? How can I share requirements reuse across many projects? We're reinventing many regulations and requirements over and over again, project to project. There seems to be no cross-project traceability. And, you know, how can I look at requirements or stories by release and priority? So knowledge management tools, in my experience, I'm basically heavily interested in the trenches, using tools and best practices. People say, just teach me the tool. I say, I can't teach you a tool. I can teach you a practice. But tools are just, they'll just do what they want, but they need a skilled operator. And so today we have a plethora of tools. There was 2 years ago, I think I had 4 clients that said, can you help us? We have 14 tools across the development life cycle, from BI tools in the business arena like LeanIX and other tools, all the way, there's hundreds of these tools, all the way through to testing. And now there's a whole plethora of new tools. And the tools industry keeps doing this to us, fragmenting the model. And I'm not saying there's one tool, I never would. There's a best of breed tools. And so we need to get a bit of sensibility about looking at the business, tracing from business architecture all the way through to tool development and back, because this is more than a dream or a vision. There are agencies and standards today that can make a change to their process, their data, or their business rules, and in 1 week, there's no coding done. It's all automated right from the CEO office, the CIO office. So that's where we're going, massive automation, not this old-fashioned way of hand coding, code and fix. So I don't want to plug any one tool, but if at the end there's question and answers, if you email me directly, I will share with you, because I do have a bias, the tools that I prefer and have worked with. My clients give me the tools to use with, or I will actually, if they don't have tools, I'll bring a set of tools I believe in, I like. So knowledge management tools, because we're talking way more than just requirements management, we're talking about managing knowledge, logic of a business, the who dimension, the when dimension, the where, the why, the what, the how, it all layers from abstract, business abstraction, from conceptual to logical to physical knowledge. And relational databases can do that. We are the makers' children, we have no shoes. And we spent so much time and millions, thousands and thousands of hours helping our clients. We work hard for them. We do the best we can, but we don't use the same tools that we've been giving them to automate their business. We need to start looking at that. So the final things here are knowledge management, best of breed tools. In order to do that, they should be cloud ready, REST API with integration. They should support open standards. And there's a few powerful standards out there that are doing a great job. Modeling, we should be able to model business transformation from the boardroom to code, and we should let the business person change their mind about a business rule without having to go through all of this requirements and coding. We should pick up the requirement of that specific change and then have it ripple through the code, and that's where it will be in time. The car industry had the same problem. They built everything by hand with code, and over time they evolved to becoming an industry where there was a lot of robotics and automation, and we're looking at the same idea, except logic and brains are much harder to robotize. There is no magical way to get knowledge out of people's brains. It's hard work. So modeling business transformation, cloud migrations will be the next major lift in the industry as people learn to trust cloud. And as soon as the CIOs learn that we're talking about 1/10 the cost of IT operations, that's a significant saving with enough security, more security than we have currently. And also business continuity, disaster recovery, backup. I once had a client, their performance was running slow on one of my cloud implementations because I run all these tools on cloud around the world. As it was running slow, I went into the dashboard, I tweaked one variable, boom, the performance ran fast. I didn't have to go through change requests or anything. I had a very rapid way of changing the landscape of the IT platforms instantly, and I had a happy customer in 5 minutes. It changed. Modeling and text traceability, we should be able to model diagrams and text and trace it everywhere. We shouldn't have it lost in Word and Visio and spreadsheets. The most popular tool for requirements management in the world is Microsoft Word, Visio, spreadsheets, and PowerPoint. And we need to find ways of getting those assets and reusing them, but still keeping the metaphor of Word, spreadsheet, and PowerPoint. We need to generate documentation from models. Model-driven architecture is what that is, MDA. We should have to have high security baseline. I should be able to lock my diagram to me. We should also be able to have 14 people working on one diagram at one time. For that reason, we do need to have open relational database technology that's not locked in. Many tool vendors will lock you in and never give you the information that you require. I shouldn't mention names, and I won't, but one of the most popular Agile tools, it's impossible to get your user stories or information out of those tools. We shouldn't be going that path. We should have an open approach to sharing information. It also, your repository should be scalable for thousands of users, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 users over time. The vendors you choose should have a loyal user group community and a low cost of entry. So this is a TOGAF diagram showing you how the real world can be modeled using a meta model, pushing your meta model into a repository, and if you have all your data in there, good information in, good information out, then we should have views and viewpoints to push it out and reports, even user stories. I have clients that they're using use cases and user stories together, and we are saving the user stories. We're creating and at the same time, we're generating them out onto a piece of paper that looks just like a recipe card they can cut, and everyone's happy. The use case people are happy, the user story people are happy. So that's it. I would turn it over now to the sponsor. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of this movement. And if I can help you, let me know. And we'll take questions shortly, and you'll see we'll talk there, and I'll have put up my email address so you can reach out to me or connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity.
Okay, Ramsay, thanks a lot. This is Stefan again from IREB. Just a few final words. First of all, I want to draw your attention to the handout. You can download a PDF from the control panel. And yeah, the CPRE is a worldwide acknowledged certification scheme. We have certified over 40,000 professionals worldwide in over 70 countries. We talk a lot about Agile as well, because as Ramsay said, requirements are still important in Agile. And check out the website and yeah, mail to us or send requests if you need further information. Thanks a lot. And I hand over to Ramsay and Tracy for the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan, and thank you, Ramsay. Ramsay, what a great presentation today. I just have to tell you how many people are asking if it was being recorded or they could see the PowerPoint. The answer is yes, so that sounds great. Our first question is going to come from Kodun. He is asking in reference to Zachman, have you found a method and tool that fully supports an integrated model of the 6 domains or interrogatives?
Yes. I've been doing it for 8 years, and if you want to reach out to my email address, I'd be happy to share that with you.
Thank you, Ramsay. Our next question comes from Sandra. And Sandra asked, does this mean that there are no good tools to manage all the requirements electronically or in a more automated way, comma, or are we just not using tools that already exist?
We're not using tools that already exist. They're hard to find. You have to be kind of a nut like me who since '89 worked in small shops. And I was always felt if I could get more tools behind me, I could spend more time with my customer. No, they do exist. I'd be happy to share those with you. There's a number of them. There is no single tool. There are integrations to tools because, of course, so I'd be happy to share that with you. But for the sake of respecting all the tool vendors, I don't really want to rain on their parade, but all the examples in this presentation did come from the tool I prefer.
Thank you, Ramsay, for that. Our next question
Sandra.
comes from Paris, and this question is for IREB, and I'm not quite sure if Stefan's available right now. Ramsay, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this. How does IREB work in an IT product lifestyle? And we can certainly send this to Stefan if you're not comfortable answering it.
I am comfortable to give you general direction on it. I'm currently not certified, but at the same time, that's exactly what it covers. So if there was a slide that says Requirements Engineering Fundamentals book. I believe it was on the first slide when I talked about the industry difficulties, industry concerns, and it covers that in detail, the IT products. If I've got the right question there, Paris.
Thank you, Ramsay. And just a reminder, if anyone does have any questions, to please type them into the question box, and then I'll read them off to Ramsay. Also a reminder, because I'm still getting questions on it, that yes, this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to the ModernAnalyst.com website within 2 business days, and it'll also include a PDF of today's PowerPoint presentation. Ramsay, we don't have any questions right now, but let's give everyone just a minute or 2 more to type their questions into the questions box. And for those that are looking for the handout from today's session from IREB, please look at the GoToWebinar control panel. If it's not minimized, you should be able to see audio or handouts or the chat section. And in there, if you click on beside handouts, you will find today's handout. Oh, Ramsay, we do have another question from David. David asks, how to get started with requirements architecture in a conservative organization. So my apologies, how should you get started with requirements architecture in a conservative association or organization?
That's a great question, David. The reason for my success is I've had a lot of dumb luck, and I came out of engineering. And engineers don't bite the silver bullet, they test it. So the best way to do is start simple. Prove it to yourself, prove it to the next person, prove it to the other person. Very rarely do you ever get success in an organization when somebody mandates, we're all going this way on Monday. People don't work that way. People are far more, especially in our industry, our analysts are extremely critical. So reach out to me for an email or others or IREB and start simple. and prove it to yourself. It's not difficult to prove to other people. People love to copy success. And as long as I don't have ego in saying, "Oh, I did this," I just let them try it out, see how it works, but prove it to yourself, sell it to yourself, find out what the strengths and weaknesses are, and then move it out slowly, one step at a time. I'm a huge fan of that approach and had great success in standing up this type of situation in many corporations over the last 20 years.
Thank you, Ramsay. Our next question comes from Alicia. How do you gather requirements with difficult stakeholders who don't want to share their business processes? If you're able to help her with that.
That's the best question ever. It came to me. I shouldn't mention this. A massive bank in the U.S. There was, of all things, can you imagine that this was only one process problem they had? No, it was a healthcare company. They were using some sort of payroll system for paying everyone, except for one group of people, consultants. And the consultants were paid by one person in Texas who kept it all in her head. And she said she felt that she'd be put out of a job if we got the requirements. I don't have an answer for that. The only answer I would say is you'll have to go up the chain. My job as a business architect and a BA is to protect leadership, and maybe to call leadership out when it's not doing the right thing too. But at the same time, protect them from. That's why I'm concerned about requirements. So aside from you just have to go up the chain, there's no other way I could do it.
Thank you, Ramsay. Our next question comes from Anna Maria. She asks, who shares the responsibility of requirements? Is it just the BA or is it the BA and the PO?
Yeah, well, I have a number of ideas. Because of all the years I worked in requirements, and by the way, I have something I didn't mention. Requirements are really tough to write. If anybody thinks they're easy, they're not. They're tough to write, but they're orphans. Nobody wants to own the requirement. No one wants to own it. So the good news is there is a framework that does want to own it. The enterprise architects own requirements, and they basically are custodians of the requirement on behalf of the business. Now, if you do not have a TOGAF certified shop or you're not an enterprise architecture and your group doesn't believe in it, then the next owner of the requirement would be the business. But if the business, that's also tough because you have different maturity levels. Really advanced PMOs understand requirements management are good, and quite often they will do that. It all depends on the level of maturity of your shop. So I'd have to know more about that. And if you want to reach out to me, I could help you maybe a bit more there if you want some answers.
Thank you, Ramsay. Our next question comes from Shannon, and she asked, what is Ramsay's advice for upskilling BAs with no formal training?
That's what I've been doing for 20 years. So I would say I'll give you a little quick story here in a minute, but right away is a large I have a lot of partnerships with major consulting firms, and they keep me in the back room, locked up and chained away, but that's good. I love being behind the scenes. And they tell me, oh, we got this massive transformation project. We need 30 BAs right away. Do you know anyone? I said, oh, yeah, you need to build them. Oh, no, we'll find them. And 2 months later, they come back. You know what? There's no one out there. We've devastated. There's not enough BAs. It is the most rapidly growing job skill. It's number 17 in the pay scales rising, despite, in my experience, what I'm seeing from my viewpoint. Basically, just get started simple. There's lots of corporations that are offering it. You can go to companies like mine. You can go to the big companies that are more generic. Global Knowledge does a great job. Learning Tree. There's a few other good ones out there. Start small. Again, start small. Get a small training course going. Prove it to yourself because it's too big of an investment to fail. You don't get, very rarely in our life do we get an opportunity to buy a really good tool or do really good training. So start small, prove it as you go, find the value immediately, prove to others, because that's another approach to take. Thank you for your question.
Thanks, Ramsay. Our next question comes from Matthew. How do you control functional or technical developers from trying to take accountability for requirements gathering sessions?
That's a cultural problem. And you know what, I must say I committed that sin. I remember I got a job in a massive government agency, and I said, I had been doing engineering and finance, and I remember thinking, what's so hard about HR? You guys start doing some coding. I'm going to go find out what they want. 2 years later, I discovered how complex. No, developers. In my mind, there's a distinct difference of work. I don't know how to. That's governance. That would go back to your culture and your governance area. And there's not a lot of governance around it. There's many people that just like to write code. So the happiest coders I've seen are people that get really good requirements. I'll tell you, when they get good requirements, they stay in the back room, put their headsets on, and sing all day long. And those are the happy developers. But then there's lots of other developers that maybe should be BAs. But there is a big difference between the two, because as a developer, I run the risk of confusing the solution with what they're saying. And I've got blinders on. So I hear that often. The best I can offer you is what I said. Thanks for that question.
Thank you, Ramsay. Our next question comes from Delma. She asks, what are your recommendations for requirements when working with virtual teams?
Well, that's where I definitely love it, because Agile to me should be virtual, and many Agile methodologies require people in the room. And it's pretty hard to get that kind of commitment. So virtual cloud tools, and the tools I use are all cloud ready. So I would never buy a tool today that wouldn't have an open relational database backend or wouldn't be cloud ready. So reach out to me after the session on email. I won't mark it to you. I'll just tell you the answer and of some of the tools that we use to do that.
Thank you, Ramsay. We do have a couple more questions, and let's see. Vinod asks, what should be the responsibility of a BA in the ideal world? Is it actually solving customer problems or supporting the problem solving as a neutral facilitator and enabler? In other words, can BAs make decisions about solutions?
Well, that's a great debate. And I've thought that and been through it many, many times. The BA, and I used to tell a story that I didn't have time for in this presentation, and I won't do it now, but a BA should focus on, there's two kinds of BAs. There's a BA and there's a business architect. A business architect is a big picture person that speaks to the CEO and the CIO, who actually frames it for the solution architects. The BAs are people who are highly skilled in being really good people skills, good analytical skills. They can, if I'm a strategic BA, I rise to being both of those things that you mentioned. But essentially, there is a great division between the business architect who frames the business area and the person that actually builds the house. So the framing, business architects are often caught in solutions, yes, but they have to work closer. A BA that doesn't understand the solution architecture that's in the technical arena is actually going to make some big mistakes. So I would say a business architect works with a solution architect, and once you have to specify it, we'll bring in the BAs to do all of that work. Now, I was a BA and I became a business architect because I accidentally thought strategically. And I didn't lose my BA skills. I still have those skills. So there's a bit of a difference in the ideal world. And I don't know that it's that ideal. I see all my clients are the 10% that get it. I can't sell to people who don't believe this stuff works. And so the bigger shops like Wells Fargo Bank, they have capability analysts. They have business architects. They have solution architects. So even a small shop, it could work. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Ramsay. We have time for just one more quick question here, and it's from Angela. Angela asks, how does the Agile methodology impact business requirements gathering?
It basically depends. I see no impact whatsoever, but there are a few experiences I've gone through, like Scrum, where they don't believe in process models, use cases, business process models, or requirements. And in that case, they're dead wrong. So, but there are lots of other Agile UP, Open Up, Essential Up. A lot of the Agile groups have requirements, and if they don't honor requirements, they are going to fail, and they are failing. So speak to me offline if you want. The requirements have been managed in Agile UP or Agile Unified Process now since '95. So, you know, that the big shops are all doing requirements. They're not. If you're a formal shop with some maturity, and you can where money or lives get lost, you have to use requirements. Can you imagine doing an Agile project for a heart-lung monitoring software machine in the ICU? Oops, it didn't work. Well, we better try again. No, it doesn't work that way. So in rigorous shops, we need to keep requirements.
Thank you, Ramsay, and thank you today for such a great presentation. We'd also like to thank IREB for sponsoring today's event. And thank you to our attendees for attending today's Modern Analyst webinar. I'd like to remind everyone that today's webinar, along with the slides, will be archived at the ModernAnalyst.com within a few business days. Thank you all for attending, and this concludes today's event. We hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you.